Okay, good morning. So we're good to go, and we're talking about two things. We will be talking about two things this class. That is personality and values, and we will also be talking about the initial part of motivation. So we have so far covered what is organization theory or what is organization behavior. We talked about emotions and moods, diversity, and what else? What is that chapter called? What is the fourth thing we covered? Correct. Attitudes and job satisfaction. And so now we are progressing on to, so we are still with the individual, talking about personality and values, and we will talk about how do you motivate people. So there's a question for all of you. Suppose you have two twins who are separated at birth, and one sort of grows up in Bengaluru in Baswangudi, in a very sort of, I wouldn't say conservative, but very Hindu family. And the other one is separated and moves to, say, Saudi Arabia and grows up in a Muslim family. And these two twins meet several years later. Do you think they'll have similar personalities? What's your point of view? Somebody shook their head violently there. They will mold into their surroundings. Okay. What else? Okay. 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 What else? Cultural influence may play a role. Very good. Okay. So personality is a fascinating subject, and hence it tries to answer these questions whether people separated who are from the same genetic pool but who are separated by thousands of miles in the environment, the ecosystem, are they similar or dissimilar? We're talking a little bit about that, and like I said, we'll also be talking about motivation. Both relate to psychology, and we'll also discuss what organizations look at when they're doing psychometric tests. That is, they're checking out personality. And why do they do it? What are they trying to figure out in people? So are the personality traits required for a salesperson different from an airline pilot? Do you think they're different? Or we could have the same personality as against a soldier in the Indian Army. Are all these similar, or are these different in some sense? So why they're different and what we are looking for, and so on and so forth. We all agree that they're different, but what are companies or organizations really looking at? What is the armed forces looking at? And so we'll talk about some of those things. And we'll also talk about different models of motivation. So all of us, I think, have some idea about what motivation is, and but there are definitive models. What model would you like to use? For example, if somebody is threatening to leave your organization, would you pay him more money to keep him? Do you think that is a motivator or not? What do you think? Do you think it's a motivator to pay people more money? Depends on what he wants. Okay. So there are no definitive answers. So which model would you like to use in which place? What are extrinsic motivators? What are intrinsic motivators? And we'll be talking about some of these things as we go. So some of the learning objectives are: describe personality, the way it is measured and the factors that shape it, the strengths and weaknesses of the Myers-Briggs type indicator, that is the MBTI personality framework, and the Big Five is something that you should know. And we'll also talk about what is core self-evaluation. I think I gave you an example in the last class of several people who go to a doctor and then get a doctor's prescription. About 50% don't read it, another of the rest of the 50%, about 30% do not sort of buy medicines and so on and so forth. It's just about 20% who follow advice given by the doctor. Why? Why do you think so? And so that is something to do with core self-evaluation. Psychologists say that these are kind of people who don't care about themselves. 80% really have a very poor, you might put up a brave face here and say that I'm really very happy and I like myself. But the truth is that several people really don't like what they see in the mirror when they get up in the morning. And they really don't care about themselves. So do you fall in that category is something that we will talk about. And how does personality affect jobs and job searches and unemployment? Even how does it impact job satisfaction and so on and so forth? So also, okay. So what are some value systems? What are value systems that really, I think I alluded to it briefly in the first class. What is a value? What do we value really in life? So most Indians, and I'll cut to the chase, most Indians value family and so on and so forth. While Americans value freedom and independence. But that's a concept. But how does it manifest itself? How does that manifest itself? Can you give me an example of how that the American love for freedom and independence, how does it manifest itself? Yeah, no, let's talk about Americans. No, I'm talking about the freedom and okay. In a sense, you said they like to go out. You're right. I think it even after marriage, even in old age, they like to hang around, and I think it's more out of comfort, and they have. If you distract me, I will put you out of the class. Excuse me, madam, and that last room. Yeah. If you distract me while I'm teaching, you will go out of the class. Am I clear? So it's very interesting how value systems impact people. So for example, in the United States, it's very difficult to get a gun out of people's hand. And despite the shooting, so they say this is a part of our value system. We value owning a weapon. And so if there's a legislation trying to remove a weapon from somebody's hand, or you pass laws that say that, okay, I don't want to own a weapon, you will find that people will react violently. So in that sense, the value systems that we carry sort of impact how we live life and so on and so forth. That's why value systems are very important. And if you look at India, and what you said is right, that people want to live with their families and so on and so forth for lengths of time because we value family connections and things. Maybe that is, do you think that is going away, or it is? Okay, fair enough. And then we'll talk about person job fit and the person organization fit. And then eventually we'll talk about Geert Hofstede's 5 value dimensions.
मैटर करता है, बोलता है असाइनमेंट वगैरह दिए, बोलता है असाइनमेंट्स में एक वीडियो बना के भेजो 12 मिनट की, उसमें आपके पास प्रॉपर फॉर्मेट होना चाहिए इस टाइप से, बोला कि कोई ऐसे टी-शर्ट पहन के आ गया ना, उस वाले का नंबर काट दो, बोला मतलब बहुत, मतलब इसको एक तो हेड है ना डिपार्टमेंट का पूरा, दूसरा कि ये एक्चुअली में डिसिप्लिन जॉब में रह चुका है, पहले कैप्टन था शिप में.
Yeah. So why do we need to compare national culture? Why is it important? So the answer is that when you deal with foreign cultures and so on and so forth, do they have the same value systems or the same traits as Indians and so on and so forth? This is something that we will talk about. But the reason why you should sort of compare countries is very interesting. In a connected world, say if you're doing business with a foreign country, you need to understand how they sort of react to your own culture. So how many of you have dealt with foreign cultures in your own workspace? So you'll have realized that they are different kinds of, they are different, they have different value systems or different, they react. Right. So personality is a dynamic concept describing the growth and development of a person's whole psychological system. So personality fundamentally comes from psychology and is a dynamic concept describing the growth and development of a person's whole psychological system. So it grows from infancy. Yeah. And unfortunately, we get many of our personality traits. Say, if you had a grandfather or grandmother who was neurotic or emotionally stable, there's a good chance that you are sort of also likely to be. You can also be neurotic, right? So you imbibe a lot of personality traits. And coming back to my question of whether twins, both born in Bengaluru, one in Baswangudi and one in Saudi Arabia, would they have similar personality traits? The answer is yes. Yeah. So because they draw heavily from their own genetic pool and not necessarily too much from their environment. What do they get from their environment? What do you think they get from their environment? Attitude. Attitude is shaped generally by, and that's why your parents must have told you that hang around with good people. Yeah, because actually, and what social scientists have found is that it is much easier to learn bad habits and bad practices than to learn good practice. And what they found more dangerously, and I think you will see in your group dynamics that it is easier to actually bring your level down to a lower substratum with one bad performer than to lift that bad performer to a higher level. And a lot of groups find this. So that's why organizations are very concerned when they recruit people and put poor performers in a good performing pool, because one rotten apple can actually spoil the entire barrel. And organizations grapple with this. How do we keep that one rotten apple out so that the entire group can sort of progress and do well? So those are some tough problems for you as managers. Yeah. So, but this class is also about how do you measure personality, because that's important. As managers, you need to know what kind of personality traits. We'll talk about what is personality first of all in terms of a framework, but how do you sort of measure personality? What do you think? How do you measure personality? Can I just look at your face and say you have this kind of a personality or no? Or what kind of personality? How do we judge? Psychometric tests are one. What are psychometric tests? So if we had time, we could have run a small psychometric test. And I could have showed you what personality trait. Maybe we'll look at it next class, hopefully, if we have some time. Okay. It's a short, maybe it will do a small personality. What else? How else can you find out? It was very difficult. Yeah. Situation simulation. Okay, situation simulation. But then you'll have to interpret that. Yeah, the interpretation is also very, very important. So, so you have, like somebody said, psychometric test. You can have self-reporting surveys. I think many of you have done these surveys. You can run surveys run by organizations, and then they are interpreted. They give out data, and they say that in this framework you have such and such a personality, and so on and so forth. Right. So, so early research tried to identify and label enduring personality characteristics: shy, aggressive, submissive, lazy, ambitious, loyal, and timid. Today, nobody follows this subset of personality traits. We have got other traits. We will be talking about two models. One is the Big Five, which is very popular, which most of your organizations would use. And the other one is what is called as MBTI. You don't get confused between the two. MBTI is also the Myers-Briggs type indicator, very popular. It's not used for recruitment. It's mostly used for counseling. Suppose you want to be counseled and you go to a psychologist, the psychologist will run a MBTI and then sort of give you some advice or counseling sessions. Okay, these are, yeah. So initially, say several years back, Rorash, he came up with what is called as the Rorash ink blot test. So it's a very simple sort of experiment. You were a subject, you went to his sort of clinic, he would throw ink on a blotting paper and then a shape would emerge. Yeah. And then you would have to explain, what do you think you see there? You see a cockroach. Very good. Okay. The lion. Okay. So therein lies the interesting part. What else do you see? You see an owl. Okay. You see a butterfly. Somebody sees a butterfly. Somebody sees a horse. So fish. Okay. Looks like a bat. Okay. Anybody else sees anything else? You see a person. Okay. What is the person doing? What? Person is holding something. Okay. Okay. What else? Do you see Batman and Superman fighting? So it gets, so if you let your imagination run wild, you will get more and more answers. So the Rorash ink blot test, if you go to a mental hospital and try to get yourself admitted, this is one test that you will encounter. So it's very popularly used in places like NIMHANS and so on, even now, maybe a century later. You don't find it too much in organizations, but the Rorash ink blot test is pretty popular to detect early signs of mental illness. Yeah. So if you're seeing something spectacular, I think you should sort of be alarmed a little bit. Yeah. And then of course you can have it in color and so on. You can make it more and more fanciful. And so this determines extremes of personality, neuroticism, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And then we come to something which is again, which sort of came up in the 1930s, which is called, and very popular still, it's called the thematic apperception. It's not appreciation, it is apperception test or TAT. Who do you think uses, have you seen something like this? Yeah. Yeah, if you go to the armed forces, the armed forces are very, very happy to use the thematic apperception test. And the idea is very simple. You will get 21 cards generally, at least when I went, it was like that. You get 21 cards and you have to write a short story. What do you see here? What do you think is happening and how does it end? Yeah. So I would give you about 2 minutes to write this story. What do you see here? What do you think is happening and how does it end? Please. Yes. You don't have to think too much. You just got 2 minutes. So and if you don't write a story, then you sent home. So in the armed forces, here you can get away with it. Anything which works for you. So guys online, I hope you're also writing the story. Okay, anybody is ready to go? Yes, please.
Actual picture is of the
Past. Very good. How does it end? Okay. Very good. Hmm. Hmm. That is the old lady. Okay. Anybody else? So both of them are reflecting on the past actually. Anybody else? Yes. Okay. Hmm. So how does it end? Okay. Okay. What else? Anybody else? Okay. Okay.
being outside, expecting an unexpected person will enter.
Hmm.
Some curiosity.
Hmm.
The lady is observing from behind what is happening.
Hmm. And what do you think happened? They are not sure what happened. Okay. Okay. Right. So everybody can come. Generally, people come up with their own stories, and then finally, because it moves so quickly, and you have to do about 21 cards in an hour or so, you generally don't have too much of time to think through what you want to write. It sort of spontaneously comes out, and then your personality is sort of determined by experts, psychologists who sit and read your stories very carefully, and then decide whether you are a good fit for the armed forces or not. And let me tell you, this is the most important part of the selection process. Like you said, the service selection board, when you go, this is the most critical part. How many trees you can climb and jump from here to there is not very relevant, because they figure they can teach you that, but they can't change your personality. Unfortunately, they can modify it a little bit, but it can't be substantively changed. So unless the Indian Army feels that, or the armed forces feel that you have a personality that suits their requirement, they will sort of not select a person. And today, organizations also are sort of doing that. And many, particularly in Europe, many organizations follow psychometric tests. US, very popular. India, I think some organizations use it, maybe not all. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, both. So I think particularly banks, if you're dealing with money and so on and so forth, they're looking for some specific traits that you might sort of, yeah. So that is a thematic apperception test, and you can have several. So this is another story that you can write about. Yeah. What do you think is happening here with the young lady and the young man? And you can sort of write a story, and that is dissected. So another one. So you will have, like I said, you'll have 21 cards, and then you can sort of write a series of stories. Very, very insightful. So when I sort of became certified to do the TAT, I ran it on a few students, and it's very interesting that you can actually peer into people's minds, and some of their deepest secrets start emerging. On the face of it, everybody looks pretty normal, but I think several people carry deep issues that have sort of come from their childhood and so on and so forth. And you can actually get a pretty good idea about what is bothering them or what direction they might take. Any questions on this? So I said, very difficult. So I think the better answer to that is that if somebody tells you that you're a neurotic, that is, or you're emotionally unstable, you know that you're emotionally unstable. So you can avoid certain kinds of jobs. But to not be emotionally unstable, I think is going to take a lot of effort. Or if somebody tells you that you are conscientious, that is, you are a responsible person, it's going to take a lot of effort to make you irresponsible. Yeah. So these are interesting. So you will find that there are many people who are responsible from very young age. Yeah. And they will continue to be responsible. There are people who are irresponsible from a young age. They continue to be irresponsible despite people trying to make corrective action. Yeah. So making personality changes is very, very difficult. So we come to the first big model, which is the MBTI. The MBTI is the Myers-Briggs type indicator. It's a survey, and you have to answer several questions, and then they come out with, several pairs. So either you could be, individuals are classified as extroverted or are you an extrovert or an introvert? And so again, personality is not about good or bad, just the way you are. And from what gene pool you sort of emerged. So are you extroverted or introverted? Are you sensing or intuitive? That is, do you go through decision-making processes carefully in an evaluatory manner? You evaluate a lot of data, sort of, yeah, and you try to sort of make decisions, or do you take decisions intuitively? That is, you kind of spontaneous based on gut feeling. That when you go to gamble, I like the number 7, and then I put money on the number 7. Or do you do some deep research and look for the past 6 months which number won? If you have that kind of data, and then you try to sort of come up with a decision-making process. So sensing or intuitive, thinking or feeling. Again, are you a sort of, are engineers thinkers or feelers? Yeah. So are women thinkers or feelers? So you sort of commonsensically, you arrived at the right answer. And that is why they say that with exception, women are less aggressive, women are more empathetic. And so people say that if they have more women leaders, you could have less wars actually, and you could have less conflict because they are more of feelers. Most engineers are thinkers. That is, they think about objects, things, how to tighten a nut or bolt, how to put which washer to put where, and so on and so forth. They are not very good at. I mean, there are always exceptions. Always exceptions. Yeah? So, but you can sort of fairly quickly put people into these categories. And then perceiving or judging. So, do you sort of judge, or do you you're perceptive, right? Or do you need a lot of you can extend a thought process into something else, or do you need a lot of data to judge, and so on and so forth. So this is very interesting. And like I said, the Myers-Briggs type indicator is not used for selection processes. It's mostly used as a counseling tool. So for example, if you are an introvert and you get into a sales job and you're struggling and you go to a counselor, the counselor will carry out a test and tell you maybe you're in the wrong job. Maybe you should change your job, which requires more of an introverted personality. Or you are, say, a doctor who has to look at a lot of data to come with a prescription, and you are a kind of a sensing type, then maybe you're in the wrong profession. You can't make decisions based on gut feeling and so on and so forth. Yeah. Any questions on this? So there is any questions on the MBTI? So the MBTI, interestingly, Myers and Briggs are a family. They are mother and daughter, and very popular. So many of your tests will be based on MBTI, yeah, or variations. But what we are really interested in is the Big 5 model, which actually most of your organizations will be using. So the Big 5 talks about 5 fundamental, and there are some similarities with the MBTI, and they talk about extroversion. So are you a extrovert or a introvert? What are you actually? Sort of. And are you sort of agreeable? What is agreeableness? What is, okay, what do you think is agreeableness? You consent to the other person's views, okay? Can be convinced easily. So agreeable people are generally nice people, as against disagreeable people like me. Yeah. The problem here is that agreeable people can be easily exploited. So if you're a very agreeable person, you can absolutely be sure somebody is taking you for a ride somewhere. Yeah. So while you think it's a wonderful trait, you might be very popular, but somebody is taking you for a ride somewhere. And it's very, very sad that most agreeable people are seriously exploited. Yeah. So it brings home the point, like the great Franklin Delano Roosevelt said that speak softly but carry a big stick. He said carry a big stick but speak softly. And the most effective leaders are those people who actually give off an aura of slight danger. It keeps everybody in line. Yeah. Otherwise, they are seriously exploited. Yeah. So if any of you are agreeable and you do a psychometric test and find that you are very agreeable, please be a little careful, particularly as a manager or a leader, and because you might be very soft actually, and your team might be taking you for a ride. And then we have probably one of the most important personality traits, that is being conscientious. Conscientiousness is to be responsible. Yeah. How responsible are you really is determined by what is the meaning of responsibility? You're very accountable, and then you're very serious, and you take your job or responsibilities very, very seriously towards whom? Responsibility towards whom? So first towards yourself, and then if you still got some gas in the tank left, then maybe your family. And then if you still got gas in the tank left, maybe your community. And then if you still got some more, maybe your society. But most people are so irresponsible, they can't even take care of. So in fact, I tell my MBA kids that, what companies are actually looking for when they come for interviews is to see whether you are responsible towards yourself. That initial point, whether you can actually be responsible towards your own. You don't have to be responsible towards the organization. Are you even responsible towards yourself? And so on and so forth. So conscientiousness is very important, and it plays a major role in a lot of selection processes. Companies want to know whether you are responsible or irresponsible. Yeah. And of course, as you know, many people are irresponsible. Emotional stability, you all know what it is. So and there's a correlation between being agreeable and being emotional stable. So psychologists have somehow found that a lot of people who are emotionally unstable also seem to be agreeable. Yeah. And this is a very strange correlation. That's something to keep in mind. And of course, and finally, so emotional stability, of course, everybody wants an emotionally stable person because they can cause confusion in the wrong place, and open to experience. That is, are you really open to experience? So for example, how many of you are vegetarian? So can I persuade you to go to a restaurant and have frog's legs? I mean, you're not very open to experience. I'm just putting your leg. Yeah? But the general idea is that, are you really open to doing several new things on a continual basis? And I don't know whether I told you this, but say a company like Google, if you want to go and learn scuba diving, they will reimburse 50% of the money you spend. Why? Because of openness to experience. They believe that you can actually learn something from several places. And I have learned a lot by just playing cricket. It teaches you a lot of life lessons, a lot of management lessons by being on the cricket field or playing some other sport or just walking and, talking to random dogs along the way. You can learn several things from several experiences. Yeah. Okay. So I hope all of you are sort of cognizant of these 5 things called the Big 5 models. Any questions along on them? So like I said, and I think you missed that point, most successful people have an aura of being dangerous. That is what they're trying to tell you is that don't mess to harm you, but if you mess with me, you're going to get a reaction. I am not going to turn the other cheek. And I think you will have to figure out how to do that and cultivate it for yourself. Because if you're going to keep turning the other cheek, especially in workplaces, somebody is going to keep hammering you. Yeah? So while I have a great deal of affection to Sri Mahatma Gandhi, I'm not sure how well it would have worked in today's context. So, for example, our friends across the border have stopped acting funny because we responded a couple of times. Yeah. Otherwise, this whole thing of terrorism was continuing on and on and on. So today they would think a little bit more carefully before embarking on some adventure. Yeah. Because why? Because you responded a couple of times. And the armed forces had that capability from a long time. Our political bosses were just not allowing us to exercise that. So that's what Mr. Roosevelt was talking about. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on. So it's very interesting about, so you can please read this. I think it's very small and I will, so what it says is that it talks about the different 5 traits and says, why is it relevant? For example, emotional stability, less negative thinking and fewer nervous emotions, less hypervigilant. What is hypervigilance? You're kind of jumpy. Every small thing that happens, you react. You have a knee-jerk reaction, which is not very good. And sort of, what does it affect? Higher job and life satisfaction, lower stress levels, more adaptable to change. So one of the big problems that I have found in workplaces is people having serious security issues. Or there are many people who are insecurity issues, or they are insecure. And this manifests itself in different ways. Have you met insecure people? They can do weird things actually. Yeah, they are resentful, they are angry, they are they take off on small things, they're moody, and you don't know what is going to upset them. They throw tantrums and so on and so forth. So obviously, being emotionally stable is a good thing to have. Extroversion, better interpersonal. So extroverts have better interpersonal skills. They reach out to more people, they talk to them. Greater social dominance, more emotionally expressive. What does it affect? Higher performance, enhanced leadership, higher job and life satisfaction, and so on and so forth. So you can please read this through the PPT as you go along as to which are the big 5, why is it relevant, and what does it affect. I think it's a rather important slide for all of you. So being agreeable is better liked. Better liked, so the number is not there. That you are more exploited. Yeah. And more compliant and confirming. That is, you are more, what is compliant? So for example, if I tell you that for next class, I want to see all of you in a jacket, how many of you will turn up in a jacket? So how many of you will not turn up in a jacket? So some of you can be. So all of you who turn up in a jacket are compliant. And those of you who do not turn up in a jacket, we're not talking about the consequences. Yeah, we're talking about the behavior of it, right? And of course, this has also got to do something with the culture and the ecosystem. And if I really create a system of fear here, all of you are really afraid and fearful, you will comply more easily. Yeah. While if it's a very open and free for all and laissez-faire and all that, so many of you say, okay, this guy keeps saying something, we don't have to bother too much. So it also depends on the external context. Conscientiousness, of course, higher performance, enhanced leadership, greater longevity. So a lot of people are concerned with the conscientious part of it. Okay, but does personality have some? So you must understand that. So, for example, let's take an example from history. At the turn of the 17th century, which was the biggest, most powerful force in the world? At the turn of the 17th century, which power was the largest and most powerful? Absolutely, the Mughals, yeah. So you had a transition from Emperor Jahangir to Emperor Shah Jahan to Emperor Aurangzeb, and that was the peak of the Mughal power. They had the most extensive land area, right from Afghanistan down to maybe somewhere in the south, some parts of it, and the richest kingdom, the greatest army. But in a few years, they had serious difficulties in dealing with a person who, I'm talking about Shivaji, who they had series of successive defeats. Why do you think so? What do you think happened? And this interesting management lesson. Why do you think that such a powerful global army could not deal with a insignificant character? They were never overcome. Maybe they underestimated, yes, but that's not the real reason. Okay, Shivaji used the guerrilla war tactic, which was a little unknown in those days. But the important lesson is that sometimes your strength can become your weakness. Yeah, and the Mughals had perfected the art. If you go back to their ancestors, the Mongols, they had perfected the art of fighting in open plains. That is, they fought in field battles, and they were not used to fighting pitched battles in mountains and in very tight corners and so on and so forth. And it affected them more when the British went, because British came because they had no idea of sea warfare. Yeah, and the British were masters of sea warfare. Their big ships and guns, the Mughals had no actually answer to them at all. Yeah? And so the point I'm trying to make here is that sometimes your strengths can become your weakness. And if you're very conscientious or you're very, very responsible, it might have a negative side to it. Or you're emotionally very stable, you might be unempathetic and very, very cold. Yeah. So you must keep that in mind, that all good things are good to an extent. And if you overdo them, they become a little bit of a problem. Yeah. Very fascinating example of the book. And I think Aurangzeb died around 1707, and about 30-40 years, the Mughals were dead and gone, finished. Yeah, they lost the Battle of Buxar to the British. Two battles, 1757 and 1764, and an empire that had existed for about 200 years and was the most, it was the biggest in the world, had sort of gone to dust. So please remember this always, that your strengths can sometimes become your weakness. Yeah, so Machiavellianism is something that is very interesting. Niccolo Machiavelli was a nobleman in the in Italian court, and he said something simple. He said, I don't care about anything as long as I achieve my ends. That is, my ends are more important than anything else. So I don't care about ethics, or I don't care about processes or frameworks or anything like that. Actually, in the end, if I get what I want, that's good enough. So you will meet several Machiavellians along the way in your own organizations. Have you met some of them who have no concern for ethical behavior or anything like that? No? So they don't care about processes. They will just do what is good for themselves personally. Yeah. So Machiavellianism is a very interesting, but it's called a dark trait because so for example, a good example is our President Donald Trump, the president of the United States, who generally does whatever he feels like. So he's now about to be indicted. In the last 24 hours through crowdfunding, he has raised $4 million. He says, I will use it to fight my sort of case and so on and so forth. So Machiavellianism or Niccolo Machiavelli, who was a person like this who gave such advice from India? Maybe you can think of somebody. A person from India who was like Niccolo Machiavelli. Another good example. Yes, Indira Gandhi also did whatever she pleased to hang on to power. But somebody who is the master of all this. So if you actually read the Arthashastra carefully, it's good. You can buy it and read it. Very interesting. And Chanakya echoes many of these. So he says that a king's role is to protect his kingdom and his people, and whatever else might happen, really doesn't. He shouldn't be bothered about it. He should win at all costs. And you have several people like General Eisenhower said, never enter a war unless you're sure you're going to win it. Yeah. And then use whatever tactics are required to win. So why do I say Chanakya was a Machiavelli? Is because of a very famous story of so the first king. Who was the king associated with Chanakya? So Chandragupta Maurya was the first king. He was a young prince who followed Chanakya along. And so his son was a guy called Bindusara. Very good. Yeah. So Bindusara was a powerful emperor. He was much stronger. He had conquered more territory and so on and so forth. And one day somebody told Bindusara, I don't know if I told you the story, but very interesting. Somebody told Bindusara that you may not be aware, but your mother was killed by Chanakya. So Bindusara actually woke up and said, is this true? He was trying to make some enquiries. And so somebody else went and told Chanakya that the king is aware that you killed his mother. And so he immediately packed all his belongings and fled from Patliputra. He fled the kingdom and came back some months later when he found that the king had quietened down. By that time, Bindusara had established the fact that his mother had been killed by Chanakya. So Chanakya comes to the court and tells the king that, I want to tell you why I killed your mother and what was the reason behind it. So those days, a popular form of assassination was by poisoning. So every morning, the king had a little bit of, like a corona shot, a little bit of poison to, sort of fortify himself against large doses of poison. And apparently that particular morning, the king who was expecting a baby, that was expecting Bindusara, was walking by, and she was not aware of this whole stratagem. So she ate a bit of that breakfast. So Chanakya was aware that both the queen and the baby are now in danger. And apparently he sort of cuts off the queen's head and then has that baby delivered. Yeah. And because as far as he is concerned, kingdom is the most important thing. The baby, because the baby sort of will extend the rule of the Mauryas, the king. So that was more important, and the queen was not so important. So that is Machiavellianism. That people are ready to go to any lengths just to preserve what they believe in or what they want. And then, of course, you have narcissism, that is the tendency to be arrogant, have a grandiose sense of self-importance, require excessive admiration, and have a sense of. So most great leaders are, right from, say, Jawaharlal Nehru to our present Prime Minister, maybe, people like Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, great man, great generals like General George Patton, all of them have a bit of narcissism. That is an exalted sense of their own self, and they don't like people telling them what they're doing is not correct. So you will deal with such people a little carefully. Yeah. Have you met narcissists? So people who believe that whatever they say is the truth, and you just have to fall in line. Yeah. And then you have something called as psychopathy, that is the tendency for a lack of concern for others and a lack of guilt or remorse when their actions cause harm. So what are psychopaths? Psychopaths, they're pretty stable actually. But again, they are a darker shade of a Machiavellian. Yeah. So there's a very interesting story, which is obviously not true. At least I don't know if it's true or not, about a funeral. And there is this lady who is at the funeral. That is, her mother has died. And she is looking around and she finds a very attractive man. And the very attractive man is sort of hanging around. And so by the time she can go and talk to him, he has sort of left. And she tries to figure out, and she figures out that this person is a friend of her sister's. So what does she do now? She kills a sister, yeah, so that the guy will come for the funeral of her sister. So psychopaths are like that. And so psychopaths again will do whatever it takes to get what they have no sense of justice or empathy or guilt or anything like that. And they say that one in 100 people is a psychopath. Yeah. Right. So so traits that can derail your career. Again, I would suggest that you look at this a little carefully. So distancing traits like being cautious, too excitable, to being leisurely. You can look at the PPT later. Being reserved, being skeptical. What is skeptical? Doubtful. You doubt everybody and everything. Or some of the seductive traits that are you're bold, you're colorful. These are people who are very attractive, particularly to ladies. Yeah. If as a man you are bold, colorful, imaginative, and mischievous, you're very, very attractive, but there can be very negative traits as well. And then you can be integrating, that is, you can be diligent and you can be dutiful. But why are these problematic? So, for example, if you're very excitable, what does it mean? You're moody, easily annoyed, hard to please, and unstable. And so you can be bipolar actually. Yeah, because you can on one hand be very excitable, the other hand you can slip into depression very, very easily. And the upside is passion and enthusiasm. The downside is volatile outbursts. Yeah. So obviously you want to be passionate and enthusiastic. You do not want to have volatile outbursts. Yeah. So what does it mean to be, say, cautious? So cautious is unassertive, resistant to change, slow in decision making. What is the upside? You can be careful and precise. What is the downside? Risk averse and indecisive. So again, it brings home the point that everything has two sides to it. And on one side, it can be good. On the other side, it can be a little bit negative or not so good. So, so if you're reserved, you can be a schizoid, and you can be stoic, calm under pressure, but you can also be incommunicative and insensitive. Yeah. If you're bold, that is, you're overly confident, inflated sense of self-worth, entitled. Yeah, a lot of young people are very bold nowadays. You can be narcissistic, you can be assertive, filled with conviction. What I'm doing is right. Or you can be arrogant and you can be grandiose. Yeah? Right. So you can have several of them. Yeah. Diligent, dutiful, imaginative, colorful. Colorful is dramatic, attention seeking, tends to interrupt rather than listen. Is a problem. You're prone to histrionics. You can be entertaining and expressive. Everybody loves you in a party. The problem is you can be socially obtuse. What is socially obtuse? You can generally be painful. Yeah, you can be insensitive. You can be saying things that are hurtful to other. Yeah, for example, I had a close friend who, when my mother passed away, first thing he told me was, "Your wife will now be happy." That was a very insensitive thing to say. Yeah. Whatever the truth of the matter might be, you must have more common sense in not saying idiotic things like that. So many years. Histrionics are people who sort of very excitable. They do a lot of drama. They throw tantrums. Yeah, very dramatic. And particularly, I see a lot of young people. One hand, they are very excited. They're all jumping. We'll conquer the world. Then next day, they have slipped into depression. Not so very common with our generation. We were more little stoic and stable. But nowadays, a lot of young people, the slightest thing seems to affect them in some way. Yeah. What do you think? Is that the right description? Yeah. Something seems to have happened. Yeah. So it's about what is called as monitoring your behavior. Monitoring your behavior is being sensitive to. So, for example, if you go to a marriage and everybody is in a festive mood, you go and say, "Oh, I feel so sorry. This person is getting married." That is being not monitoring your. Or in a we had a real problem in one of our ships, and I was a very junior officer, and I was called to this senior meeting simply because I was the fellow who was going right down to the bottom of the ship to inspect water leakage, and I used to measure it and come and report every half an hour to the captain as to what is happening. And so I was called. Now I was junior officer. Nagaraj, what is happening actually? So I gave some description. So on and so forth. And somebody asked the captain that, "Captain, what do you think we should be doing right?" And he was a brilliant guy, very imaginative, very smart, spoke English very well. And he said we should make another hole beside that hole. And it took a little time to sink in. There is already a hole and water is flooding in. And he says we should make one more hole to drain out water, which will actually make the situation worse. He was sent home in the next 5 minutes. Yeah, nobody appreciated his sense of humor, not in situations like that. So you should learn to monitor your behavior and what you say at which point in time and to whom. Yeah. So this is very interesting, and this is put up by Robert and Joyce Hogan. Again, they're a husband and wife team. Brilliant paper. Let me see if I can fish it out for you. So this is not from a textbook, yeah. Right. So let's come to other personality traits relevant to organization behavior. I just talked about core self-evaluation a little while ago as to what do you feel about your own self when you get up to brush your teeth. Do you hate that reflection? So seriously, if that is the case, please go and sort of have it sorted out because it is going to grow. Yeah, self-monitoring is just now I talked about it. How do you monitor your behavior? And proactive personalities, people who identify opportunities, show initiative, take action, and persevere until meaningful change. This will make you a great manager. If you have a proactive, no, I'll just wait for things to happen. I'll wait for that laddu to fall from the sky. I'll keep my mouth open. And so I had a fellow when I was in school. I had this guy who, of course, I didn't grow up in Bangalore, but I had this guy who came from Bangalore. He was a Punjabi fellow. And while all of us were sort of 4 feet 9 inches, he was already about 5 feet 7 inches or 8 inches, huge guy. And his claim to fame was that he had been coached by Roger Binney, the Karnataka fast bowler, and impressive fellow. So he told me one day, that Nagaraj, I figured out a strategy. So I said, what strategy is this? So he said, I put the book under the pillow and have a mixture of banana, milk, and sugar. So I said, what will happen after that? All subjects will be passed. So I said, okay, maybe you tried this time. I will do it. And he promptly failed in all the subjects. And then had to repeat a year. So proactive personalities are not like, proactive personalities kind of take the bull by the horns and make things happen. You want a proactive. So the cricket team wants a proactive captain, somebody who can make things happen on the cricket field. And that's why the a person who's really appreciated, who changed Indian cricket is Mansoor Ali Khan Patawadi, who was as a young person, was very proactive captain. Otherwise, Indian cricket was very, very defensive. But this was the first guy who came along and said that let's attack and let's try to win matches and so on and so on. So you want proactive people. Okay, what's the time? First time, okay, under 15 minutes. So what personality characteristics predict job search behavior? So people are looking mostly at, and like I told you, conscientiousness. And so why extroversion? So unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, the extroverts do much better in a interview because they look more confident, they've got more josh, they speak more loudly, and they may not be sensible, but they speak more confident. They're more engaging as well. You're right. But these also somehow seem to signal leadership traits. Yeah. So if you're an introvert, you might like to be a little careful about it. And of course, self-esteem and self-efficacy. What is self-efficacy? Self-efficacy. So for example, I take you now and I take you to say Mangaluru and park you on a ship and say, take this to Boston. Can you do it? If they put to me, can I do it? Why? That is self-efficacy. Yeah. If you put me on an aircraft and say, fly it from here to Timbuktu, can I do it? Obviously not. Yeah. So the answer is that self-efficacy are those people who believe that they can do a job and who are trained to do a job. Again, it doesn't, I'm going back to my story of my Punjabi friend who ate that banana mixture. Yeah. That is not self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is derived how? How do you become? By hard work, discipline, and training. So, an experience. And you learn. So, experience also is a little difficult. So, one auto rickshaw driver told me many years back that, sir, I have 30 years of driving an auto rickshaw. Is that 30 years of experience? So I told him, no, you have 1 year of experience into 30. So he was a little puzzled actually as to what I was talking about. But many of us are like that. You actually have 1 year of experience and you keep doing the same thing repeatedly. That is not experience. You have experience when you do different things well. Yeah. Okay. So situation, okay, consequential. So values are basic conviction about what is right, good or desirable. Value systems, that is ranks values in terms of intensity. The importance of organization values lays the foundation of understanding of attitudes and motivation, influences attitudes and behavior. So for example, the value system of say Infosys is what? Quality and integrity. And if you are the person who wants to give a bribe to every third fellow you meet, maybe that's not a place where you should be working. Please go and join an organization where they're happy to give bribes. Yeah. So again, you have terminal values, that is desirable end states of existence. Instrumental values are preferred modes of behavior or means of achieving them. So for example, what are some of your terminal values? Anybody, any of you have got terminal values? What's your terminal value? What do you want to, so the question that is asked to you is, where do you see yourself in 10 years, right? Popular question. So that's a terminal value. Where do you see yourself after 10 years? You'll be an entrepreneur. That is fantastic. Where do I see myself in 10 years? I want to see by the South Pacific, having a beer and sitting by the beach. That's very nice. How is it going to happen? And that is the, yeah. So what do you have to do to become an entrepreneur? What do I have to do to have that mug of beer by the Mediterranean coast or the Pacific coast or wherever I want to sit and have that beer, right? So that is the part that many people forget actually. The terminal part, all of us get to very easily. Okay. I need that guy. Somebody call him. So let's quickly talk about so any questions while we wait for Shri Imtiaz to come?
Just try to tell.
Never going to happen. No problem. No problem. It's not your core competence in searching for Imtiaz. Just come here, please. Class. So, Gert Hofstede was a Dutch social scientist, and he came up with this global cultural dimensions. How do you compare the culture of one country with the culture of another country? And he had 5 parameters. Actually, there are 6 now. We look at these 5. Said they are power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term versus short-term orientation. So, for example, just 1 minute. So what is power distance? Power distance is that how easily you accept that somebody is. So for example, do you accept that I know more about OB than you? Question is why? So yeah, because I carry a title of professor and I am teach here and so on and so forth. And that is power distance. How easily does a culture accept the authority of a person who's. So do you accept that your father knows more to you? Maybe if I take you back 15 years. That's power distance. Why? Because he's my father. So he obviously must. And then suddenly you get a shock when you know that your father actually doesn't know too much. And then therein starts the little bit of a. Because as a kid, all of us think that our fathers are superheroes. And then slowly we get to realize that they are just as ordinary as it's a painful part of life. And then you have something called as individualism versus group. What do you think? What are you guys? So many Indians have this somehow romantic notion that we are a very collective people. Farthest from the truth. We are very, very comfortable being individualist. Yeah, we work best when we work. Unlike several other cultures. Masculinity versus femininity, that is, how masculine is your country? I'm not talking about male, female. Indians, masculinity, femininity. So masculine countries, people want, so for example, so this girl here. Suppose I offered you two jobs. One job is senior vice president, where I pay you 40,000 rupees. Or another job where you are called supervisor and you are paid 50,000. What will you take? Senior vice president. So that is a classic sign of masculine country. So we want big titles, big cars, big houses, and so on. As against, what do we sacrifice for this? What else do we sacrifice? Work-life balance. So we are ready to let go work-life balance for big titles and so on and so forth. We are sort of as against feminine countries like say France is a classic case of a feminine country, which sort of Belgium and so on and so forth, which say that if you will go to France, you'll find small cars, smallish houses, but they want to work only. Yeah, reduce. So but they want to work only 3 days in a week. Yeah, they're pushing towards, and they're unlike the American, they will not have a burger on the fly. They want to sort of sit there and have a very, very careful lunch with a nice tablecloth and so on. And so masculinity versus femininity. So, for example, if you're a very masculine, come from a masculine country and you go to a feminine country, you need to sort of watch out a little bit. Uncertainty avoidance is that how much of a risk taker are you? So, are Indians risk takers by nature? Not very, not very. We would like to avoid risk as far as possible. And long-term versus short-term orientation. Do we look at things in the long term or the short term? So we are classical, we are an old civilization, we have been around, so we don't really, if we contract, let's sign for 15-year contract. Unlike the Americans, who's a 6-month contract, yeah, or 3-month contract. They don't want, so they are not very long-term. Yes. Not necessarily. It's got more to do with culture, how we have been brought up. Yeah. I mean, as a culture is the shared experience of several generations of people, and what we have imbibed from our parents, grandparents, and so on and so forth is what we're talking about. That's why you have national cultures, national value systems versus which is distinct. I'll just show you. Stop sharing. PPT, another PPT. What? I sent you one more PPT.
Country compared.
That is country compare. So actually, I did this exercise. You can also go and try it out. And yeah, go to the next slide. Yeah, I compared India, Japan, Russia, and United States along those parameters that I talked about: power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation. And you can see the variation actually. Yeah, power distance in the United States is 40, India it is 77, and Russia 93. Yeah, Japan it is 54. Why? Because it's a communist, it was a communist country. Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting how countries can actually. So you can put any set of countries. You can go and do this exercise yourself. Go to Gert Hofstede's site. He gives a free option, and you can plug in several countries and see how they. So you can say, let me put Switzerland. The Bueller guys might be interested in that, and say, how does Switzerland vary with India? Yeah. Or if you're working with Sweden, how does Sweden vary? And then so next time you are more careful when dealing with executives from that particular country. Yeah. Any questions here? Yes. So Gert Hofstede did a very interesting thing. How he went and examined 160 countries or 155 countries. How did he do this? Just think about it. In a lifetime, it's not good. I have been to several countries, but not 155. How do you go and check out? So he had a very interesting way of doing it. He went and approached the big daddy of them all, IBM, and said that give me space for 1 week in each of your offices across the world. And IBM did that. So they placed him in India, they placed him in Russia, they placed him in Chile, Brazil, and they gave him time 1 week, and he went and carried out studies in each of those places, and then came up with the Hofstede's cross-cultural model for comparing countries. And it's a brilliant piece of work which took a couple of years, but then today it is the standard model. You've got one more model by a guy called Franz Trompenaar, also a Dutchman, also very good, but Hofstede's work is sort of followed by many countries. Okay, please. So I want to show you a couple of quick videos, and you should tell me what do you think. Stop. I will play the video. Plane hit good first. So this is put it and then so this is from a movie called Sully, and it's a place where I go whenever I go to New York. I visit. It's a very nice. It's a very for me. It's spectacular of how a person could land a plane on the river. Yeah, and this is about that. Let's watch it and then we'll talk about it.
Once I'd like to get out of LaGuardia on time.
Yes.
Well, you know the only way to get out of LaGuardia on time. Yeah, what's that? Fly to JFK. Buddy.
Coming for people online. Video was there when I put the video. We should try it when it comes actually, when you load it.
Take off minimum fuel quantity verify. 19,000 pounds required. We got 21.8 on board.
19,000 pounds required, 21.8 on board.
Cactus 1549, runway 4,
Coming
clear
on
for
the
takeoff.
Cactus 1549, clear for takeoff.
Sorry.
Okay, what we shall do is we'll take a break. Then when we come back, maybe we'll get this sorted out. Yeah. So yeah, it's now what? It's 10:50, 11:10.
Just once, I'd like to get out of LaGuardia on time. Well, you know the only way to get out of LaGuardia. What's that? Fly to JFK. Buddy.
Take off minimum fuel quantity verify. 19,000 pounds required. We got 21. On board.
19,000 pounds required, 21.8 on board.
Cactus 1549, runway 4, clear for takeoff.
Cactus 1549, clear for takeoff.
Sorry.
Go this side.
Maybe for posterity, some part of it is lost now. Okay, so right. So that is the self-actualization part where you work because you really want to work. Yeah. Any confusion with this model is fairly simplistic. So, for example, you know, when the first company that set up a greenfield project in China was Motorola, and when the Motorola CEO went up, and then he was saying that, you know, he was telling the Chinese that, look, we will sort of give you a lot of things and we will recognize your talent and maybe we'll send you to Harvard for a short course and so on. And then he stopped and said, any questions? And one old Chinese put up his hand and said, will you build a house for us? So while this guy was talking about higher order needs, the Chinese employee was asking him a very basic question. Will you give me a house? And Maslow says, and that is why he's also criticized. Maslow says that you cannot get self-actualized unless you go through all these steps. So you start here and then you slowly go up. So for example, if I tell you I'll give you that smiley and make you, you know, employee of the week, but if your salary is 0, will you be happy? Can you smile about it? So that's what Maslow was talking about. He said that you first of all have to pay people. The roti, kapda, makan part should be taken care of before you start doing other wonderful things. So Maslow's hierarchy is very popular. Many people still talk about it. You must know about it because it's commonsensical and very, very fundamental. Yeah. Then we come to another interesting theory called the Herzberg's two-factor theory. And the Herzberg's two-factor theory is fascinating. So people said that either you are dissatisfied or satisfied. So for example, if I asked you, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with anything? Are you satisfied with this class or dissatisfied? So you can also say dissatisfied. Yeah. Herzberg said it's not that simple. He says people are not either motivated or demotivated. So he said that there are factors. If you are dissatisfied, it can lead to, listen to this carefully. He said that if you are dissatisfied, it can lead to demotivation. Yeah. But there are factors also, even if you are satisfied, you need not be motivated. Very interesting, right? So he said that there are many factors. If you're dissatisfied, you can be demotivated. So for example, if I call you here and put you in this classroom, there is no AC, it is dark. Are you dissatisfied? Answer is yes. But I give you a brilliant classroom, beautiful air conditioning, much better than this. Are you motivated to listen to the lecture? Not necessarily. You're just satisfied with the class. So that is what Herzberg was trying to say, that there are factors. So for example, if I put you in a great office, but in a job that is unchallenging, you might still be demotivated. So Herzberg said, don't. So he called them hygiene factors and he called them motivators. So we have many hygiene factors. For example, a hygiene factor can be your workplace practices or policies. Yeah. Where your policies are very good, but your work is unchallenging. So finally, Herzberg came back and said that some things that really matter in a job are the job itself. Is the job interesting? Is the job challenging? Is the job, exciting? Do you feel you're making an impact? Do you understand the job? And so on and so forth. He said these are the real motivators. That cricket match that you play on Saturday afternoon is in a sense, a satisfier. It may not really motivate you to work harder at your particular job. So that was Herzberg's two-factor theory. So for example, he said so hygiene factors are working conditions, co-worker relations, policies and rules, supervisor quality, and interestingly, he said also salary. He said that salary will prevent you from being dissatisfied, but it may not be a motivator. Yeah. So just by giving people more and more money may not be a great way of motivating people. So then the question is, how do you motivate people? And you have several factors like achievement, recognition, responsibility, work itself, advancement, personal growth. So if you take care of these, according to Herzberg, he said that you will actually be motivating people. These are just hygiene factors which prevent job dissatisfaction. It's a very fascinating theory. Yeah. A lot of criticism of Herzberg. What do you guys think? Does it make sense to you? Yeah. Okay. So this was the Herzberg two-factor theory. And then you had other theories which came along. And for example, a very popular theory is the McClelland's theory of needs. So McClelland said that human beings have three requirements. That's it. One is the need for, I want to achieve. Yeah. And you can do a test actually. We can find out what drives you. The other one is a need for power. I want to control other people. And the third one is need for affiliation. That is, I want to be liked by other people. That is, everybody should. So how many of you have a high need for affiliation? You want other people to like you. All of us have it to an extent. Yeah, we all like to be liked. But then when that becomes overpowering, or really that becomes the cause for our existence, have certain problems. So McClelland's theory of needs says that good managers or good leaders have a high need for achievement, a medium need for power, and actually a balanced need for affiliation. But all the time, if you're going around expecting other people to like you, you are shooting yourself in the foot. So if you can do a test and if you find that you have a high need for affiliation, you should be changing that need in yourself. So this is a fascinating theory, McClelland's theory of need. So if you're the type who says that all the time, so be careful. If you're the type who feels that. So for example, when I took this test, I had a high need for achievement, a medium need for power. So far it was good, but a very low need for affiliation. I didn't seem to care what other people thought about me. So is that a healthy thing? Not really. So I tried to be a little bit more nice and nice to people, so that I raised that quotient a little bit, and people sort of, I was tolerable to other people. So the need for affiliation. Okay. And then we have what is called as the self-determination theory. That is, people prefer to feel they have control over their actions. So you have this word called empowerment. So people want to feel empowered. That is, I can sort of do what I like to do with my own life and so on and so forth, and focus on the beneficial effects of intrinsic motivation and harmful effects of what is intrinsic and extrinsic. So you're on a job because you like the job. How many of you are in job because you like the job? Or how many of you are in job because you like the money? So that is extrinsic motivation. You're in a job because you like the money, which actually, according to social scientists, is a problem. And sooner or later, you're going to run out of gas. Yeah. And problems are going to manifest themselves with extrinsic motivators. So focus on the beneficial effects of intrinsic motivation and harmful effects of extrinsic. So somebody gave you, like this girl here, she said, I want the job because they call me senior vice president and not supervisor. Actually, if you're called supervisor and paid a little bit more, maybe you're happier in that particular job rather than with the title, which is again an extrinsic motivator. So what social scientists keep reinforcing is that, first of all, do you have control over your job? That is efficacy. 2, do you like your job? 3, is your job having some kind of impact on larger society, or are you just there for the money? Yeah. And then the cognitive evaluation theory is, when people are paid for work, it feels less like something they want to do and more like something they have to do. So actually, a lot of people who work in the social sector have found this, or people who have talked to them have found that money may not be the main driver. And again, kind of the quality, the impact. So that's why you'll find that, say, people in the armed forces, say junior officer category, who are getting paid less than, say, ground level software engineers or BPO workers, but they're far more motivated. Yeah, they're far more motivated. The question is why? Why do you think they're motivated? One is they like what they're doing. 2, they genuinely believe that they are making an impact on the country, which a lot of maybe other people here are not, do not have the same feeling or thought process. Yeah. So so intrinsic motivation, again, I keep reinforcing, is very, very important. So proposes that in addition to being driven by a need for autonomy, people seek ways to achieve competence and positive connection to others. So again, this word keeps coming up, the competence part of it. So it's not just about money or position, it's, are you competent to hold that particular position? And if you're not competent, then there is a problem, because you're going to have burnouts and stress issues and so on and so forth. Yeah. So if you feel you're not competent, what do? Either you can learn quickly, or you can go and find another job where you feel you are competent. Yeah. And I think that is one of the reasons why there are so many problems, because people get into jobs for the extrinsic motivators, like the money and the position and the brand of the company, rather than the job itself, and whether they have competence over the job or not, and whether they are interested in doing that particular job. So self-determination theory suggests that people can become self-determined when their needs for competence, connection, and autonomy are fulfilled. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we are talking about variations of the self-determination theory, which talks about autonomy, connection, and empowerment under various circumstances. Okay, so it also talks about self-concordance. That is, if you're lucky, so for example, if you're very lucky, that is, you can be like me. I think that teaching is a great profession because it makes impact on society. And I'm a teacher. So am I in a good space? Not many people are. So you can have people who say that defending the country is my value system, and they become a soldier. So they are in concordance. Yeah. So if you can align your job or what motivates you to your own value system, then you have self concordance and you are sort of in a good space. Again, otherwise, again, you can start having what is called as emotional labor. And I think I talked about it in my first class where I said that, you are in a job where you should look happy all the time, but actually you're not. It can create sort of problems for yourself. So self-concordance is an important word. Considers how strongly people's reasons for pursuing goals are consistent with their interest and core values. For example, if I put a pure vegetarian into a butcher's shop, how happy do you think he's going to be? How much ever money you pay the person, this might collide with his core interests or value systems, and he may not like to do it. So I was trying to, I sort of got a position as dean a few years back in Lonavala. So I sort of decided to go because it looked exciting. And my house, we were wondering what to do about it. And then finally a foreigner came along and he said, "Can I rent it out?" And we said, "Okay." So he came, he was a Dutch guy. He came and he had married a Indian Muslim lady. So she also came. And my wife is actually generally she doesn't speak much, but sometimes sort of she has these very firm convictions. And so, we were about to sign. And then she asked him that, "What kind of meat will you cook in the kitchen?" So this fellow said, "All kinds of meat." So she said, "I'm sorry, we're not renting the house to you." And he said, "No, my wife says I can't eat pork. And now you are saying that I can't eat other meats. I will die of starvation." So she said, "That's your problem." Yeah. And finally, we didn't sign, of course, and he left. But you can actually have very firm convictions and then get into conflict, which is conflicting with your own value system. Unfortunately, that was a very short stay, and then I came back to Bangalore and we reoccupied our house. The point I'm trying to, again, I'm not talking about the good and bad of it, the right and wrong of it. I'm only saying that people can have value systems which collide with their practices, and this can become a little bit of a problem if you're not careful. Okay. What does this mean? Choose your job for reasons other than extrinsic rewards. So your job should be in alignment with your value systems and what you really want to do. For organizations, provide intrinsic as well as extrinsic, very important. So you can't keep throwing money at people only. You also need to, so for example, if somebody likes social work, HP does that. I think half a day in a week, they allow people to go and do social work. If you like social work, go and do social work. Like Google, if you like scuba diving, go and do scuba diving. We will reimburse the cost of it. Or if you want to go and learn a management, do a management course, go and do it. We'll give you 30% back. So they have tied up both. They also pay very well. Yeah. So we'll pay you, but we will also give you other opportunities to explore your own value system, and good organizations do that. They bring in both extrinsic as well as intrinsic incentives. Yeah. So what is a goal setting theory? So goal setting theory was another interesting theory. It came up, a gentleman called Locke, Dr. Locke, came up with the goal setting theory, social scientist. How do goals motivate people? Do you think goals motivate people? They do? How? So what kind of goal should you set people is the question. Absolutely. Realistic goals that can be. So you have this thing called SMART goals. All of you must have heard about them. They are specific, they're realistic, they are attainable, they're measurable, and they're time bound. Eventually, you can't say that I will, become a manager after 50 years. It is irrelevant. You must say the next, say 3 years or 4 years or 10 years or whatever. Yeah. So the goal setting theory is, what is the problem with the goal setting theory? So why are goals important? Why should you have a target? Clarity. Yeah. So this Harvard professor says that, you see what you aim for. Very interesting short statement. He says, you see, I take you back to the story of the Pandavas practicing archery. And when Dronacharya asks Arjuna, what do you see? He says, I see the eye of the bird, the target. Yeah, everybody sees, they say everything other than the bird. Yeah, and obviously they miss it. But this guy sees what is there to be seen. Why? Because he's got a specific goal. And that's why goals are important, because they allow you to focus and allow you to see more. Otherwise, you can be actually aimless and you can be wandering all over the place. Yeah. So that's the general idea. So Locke's goal setting theory has one problem. What is that? What is the problem with the goal setting theory, where you set goals and get people to fall in line? What's the problem? Very good. People are feel bound to do it. They are not consulted in any sense. So that was sort of mitigated by Peter Drucker's management by objectives. Yeah. So the MBO is management by objectives. And I think this is what most of you follow, at least notionally, where your boss calls you every year and says, what are the goals that you will attain? And then you agree, or can you disagree with the boss? Technically, yes. Technically, yes. You can sort of push back and say these goals are unrealistic. And so Drucker came out with this brilliant model, and he said that there is XYZ company. You have overall organizational objectives. You have divisional objectives. You have departmental objectives, and you have individual objectives. Yeah. And then it's a cascading thing. Obviously, the individual objectives must be in alignment with the overall organizational objective. It is very important. And this must be the flow. And here it's a consultative, unlike in Locke's goal setting theory, this is a more motivational framework, because you are in the loop, or it's sort of run past you, and you will sort of also be you'll have a buy-in, or you will say that I agree to these goals. And so once you agree, you will work much, hopefully, harder at achieving those particular goals. Which do you think is better? So today, even with your kids, it's mostly an MBO process, right? You negotiate goals. Should you negotiate goals with your kids? It's a very interesting question. Yes? They negotiate. Okay, very good. And you sort of just succumb. Okay. What do you think? I want to know from you. Should not negotiate. Young age. It's a very interesting, very interesting this thing. So, for example, let me just tell you a story from my own life, where I always, thought that I knew what was good for my kid. And when he came to 12th standard, he was a bright guy. He got past the IIT JEE exam. So he got a good rank. So all of us were jumping with joy, me more so, because I always knew that he's going to make it into IIT. And as a proud parent, one day he came back at home and said that, and he passed a series of exams. He said, I'm going to join BITS Pilani. And I was sort of horrified. And I called him and said, do you understand what it is to get into an IIT? And he said, yeah, I know, but I want to go to BITS Pilani. So how do you think I should have dealt with this situation? It's Yeah, he gave some cock and bull story he gave. I think his girlfriend wanted to go there. Or she persuaded him or something like that happened. So I told him that, listen, if you don't want to go to IIT, I'm not going to pay your fees. And the matter ended there. So eventually he went off to an IIT, he finished his education, many things, life went by. But he came back and told me several years later that thank you for doing the right thing. Yeah. So I am not sure about this whole consultative process all the time. Sometimes if you are the guy who is leading the pack, then you should make the decisions. Yeah, because I might be wrong, but it's an interesting debate. But how much will you debate and negotiate, and for how long? Yeah, what do you think? Did I do the right thing? I'm not. Yeah. So it could have gone either direction. Yeah, but nevertheless, the MBO is a very popular motivational tool that is most used by most organizations. Yeah, it's very difficult. So say when I finished my 12th, I wanted to be a history teacher. So I wanted to do BA history and then MA history, then PhD in history and become a history professor. My father gently pointed out that history professors don't earn too much of money. And although he had a good job, we were not rich by any stretch of imagination. Yeah, we didn't have a property made by my great grandfather and so on. And I think it resonated. And so that is why I went into the Navy and so many other things happened. I think he was right. Yeah. I think how do people look at it actually? So the problem with many kids nowadays, I was having my eyes tested 2 weeks back at one of Bangalore's spectacular eye hospitals. These are 4 generations of ophthalmologists. That is, the great grandfather set it up, the grandfather. And the doctor came and told me that, Professor, my daughter wants to do BBA. So I said, can't you talk to this daughter and tell her to do something more difficult in life? Yeah. But a lot of children want to do things that are very easy. Why? Because it is comfortable. I think their parents have to step in and then tell them that, you need to do the tough things in life to gain success, to be rewarded. You can't keep on doing easy things and keep running away from responsibility. And that's why parents have a role. And there's too much of negotiation. I'll let my kid do whatever they feel like doing is utter nonsense as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, you can follow whatever route you want. But I think the bigger premise is do the difficult things. That is how you gain efficacy, and that is how you gain success. I don't want to sound like Sadhguru, but let's keep it to OB. Yeah, since you asked the question, what do you think? No, as long as you're not following a path because it is the easy path, I'm fine with it. Yeah. You can always practice actually. So for example, I had trouble with maths while going through school. The reason being I was playing too much of cricket. Not that I was bad at maths. I had to do complicated mathematics like spherical trigonometry and advanced geometry when I was going through college and learning navigation, which I did fairly well. Because why? Because I was paying more. attention and practicing, and that is efficacy. Sometimes we neither practice nor we focus. You must make that difference. Yeah. Suppose somebody asks me to do Bharatnatyam. I'm fairly certain it's not going to happen. Yeah. How much ever I practice. But there are other areas, if you practice hard enough, you can master. Okay. So, all interest of time. So we come to what is called as the self-efficacy theory, and this one was put up by a guy called Albert Bandura. Bandura is a great guy as far as I think, and he said that the self-efficacy theory is an individual's belief that he or she is capable of performing a. So first of all, for you to be motivated, you must believe that you can do something, and that is why people who come from, say, the IIMs and so on and so forth are generally successful. Why? They're not smarter than other people. They believe truly that they are capable of success. Why? Because they have got through that wonderful CAT or that IIT JEE or something. They have that confidence that we can actually achieve, which is missing in several people. And that's what I do even in my MBA class. My first job is, how do I give you confidence in believing in yourself? First, you must believe in yourself to be motivated. But if you believe that you're a loser, then nobody can actually help you. In a sense, all of you guys are, should, like I keep saying, should congratulate yourselves because you took the challenge to come and sit in a class like this. How many of you are now finding it very difficult? I don't know. But you took said, I want to do something that improves me. How many of you are finding it very difficult? If you are, it's good. That means you are testing your limits actually. Yeah. So Albert Bandura said that you need something called as enactive mastery. You need vicarious modeling. You need verbal persuasion, and you need arousal. So he said, what is enactive mastery? Enactive mastery is that did you practice hard enough and long enough to gain confidence in a particular area? Talent does play a role. So however hard you might practice at cricket, you are not going to become Tendulkar or Kohli. Yeah, but you can achieve a level of competence in a specific area. Limiting factors are your own motor skills and so on and so forth. Vicarious modeling is very interesting. Vicarious modeling is, anybody heard of vicarious modeling? So, along with my cricket, I was also very good at table tennis. And I can assure you, I can still beat many of the students here at table tennis if we play. But I used to play a lot of table tennis on the ship. And when I was there, and sometimes my wife would say that, can I sort of come and look at you? I said, yeah, if you want to come and sit there, fine. So one day she said, I will also play. So I said, did you play in school or college? She said, no. Did you practice before? She said, no. I said, okay, how will you play then? So she started playing, and actually she played quite well. So I said, you must be lying. You must have played somewhere to actually have this kind of competence. And she told me something very interesting. She said, I learned by watching you. And that is why you need role models. So Albert Bandura said that vicarious modeling is that you can actually learn by watching other people. You can actually learn quite a lot from watching others. So one is an active mastery where you practice extremely hard. Two is by watching the right people, not the wrong people. Yeah. Role models are, so for example, if you are going, I see many times this woman on a scooter, fairly, well endowed and plump, and the scooter is wobbling, and she doesn't have a helmet, and there are 3 children behind her, and she's going somewhere. What kind of an example do you think she's setting for her children? And then you tell your children, no, you must be very safe, wear a helmet, and so on and so on. Yeah. So the fact of the matter is that you must be a good role model for other people to follow if that is what you want in life. Yeah. So, and if you want to learn something, learn it from the right people and not from the wrong set of characters. So vicarious modeling is very important. Verbal persuasion. What is verbal persuasion? Talking to yourself. Yeah, you can also talk to yourself. Or like psychologists say that surround yourself with people who won't tolerate your nonsense. Yeah, you don't want people who will agree with you on everything. You want people who will tell you the truth. Yeah, that you are an absolute ass and you're crying all the time. You want people like that. What do you say? You agree or no, disagree? You want people who are going to tell you the truth about yourself. Why? So that you can actually improve. Yeah. Constructive or destructive, you should get people to tell you the truth. Yeah. You should take it in a constructive. That's why your enemies sometimes are good, because they tell you the unvarnished truth. They give you the actual picture of what should be expected. And finally is arousal. That is, are you really excited? Are you really excited about something in life? And um, how do you kind of get yourself into a state of excitement? So Albert Bandura said that, for you to really be motivated to continue over a length of time, for motivation. And you can actually practice it at the workplace. And active mastery, is your team, do they have competence to do a particular job? Vicarious modeling, do they have a good, are you a good model first of all, or you're going for frequent cigarettes breaks? Every 15 minutes, you're going for a smoking break outside and, wasting everybody's time. Um, so, very interestingly, we have this archaic uh, system of biometric, biometric, right? So even I punch out and punch. Suddenly I found that in our place here where all me and my staff punch out, whenever we go out at 4:45, there is a queue that is about a mile long, which was never happening earlier. So I said, what the hell is going on suddenly? And who are all these strange fellows? So I found that the engineering fellows who are in the other block, they leave their office at 4:30 and slowly they will walk and come and stand here at about 4:35. 10 minutes they're standing the queue. 4:45, they'll punch out and run to the bus. But actually they're leaving their workplace at 4:30. And 15 minutes are lost in wandering from there to here. So I was asking some of them, what kind of a role model are you to your students? If you do this, of course, it doesn't sink in. And then next question was, don't you have biometric systems in your own building, which they have? But then they have to walk from there to here, right? 4:45. So they have to, if then somebody will ask them, why are you standing at 4:30? So that's the point. The point is, are you a decent role model for people to follow or not? Yeah. And are you wasting time? And to just reinforce this, I want to show you a video for which I need Mr. Imtiaz. I think you don't know Imtiaz. I think. Yeah. Huh? He claims he was there. So you looked in the wrong place. Any questions? Please come. Huh? So, okay, NPS has come. So we'll just talk about this slide. So individual has confidence that given level of performance will be attained. That is, he has self-efficacy or competence. Individual has higher level of job or task performance. It's in the loop. Individual sets higher personal goals or for his or her performance, and manager sets difficult specific goals for job or task. Why should manager set a higher level, raise the bar high? So suppose, so which is better? If you tell your kid it's good to get 100 on 100, or if you get 50 on 100 is good enough, which is better? Why? Very sad. Why do you think you should be setting that goal on 100 on 100? Okay, no, that's a impoverished way of looking at it. So there's a very interesting story of, I'll end this and Imtiaz will then play out. 2 minutes. So it's called the Pygmalion theory. Have you heard of the Pygmalion? Nobody. Very sad. You people don't read. So the Pygmalion is an English novel written by a great guy called George Bernard Shaw. So George Bernard Shaw was an Irishman, and he was much married, and he married and divorced several times. So once he is said to have told his wife that, your children and my children are fighting with our children. So there was a lot of noise, and he was very unhappy about it. Um, he also said very famous things like, cigarette smokers are people with a fire at one end and a fool at the other end. So anyway, G.B. Shaw wrote this book called The Pygmalion. It's basically about a English professor who is extremely narcissistic and an egoist. And he has a friend who's a doctor who's serving in India. He comes back and they're walking down the road, and this professor is telling his friend how great a professor he is. And his friend is an agreeable guy, so he keeps nodding his head. And then the professor says, they're walking through on the roads of London. And he says that I can actually pick up anybody from here. And I can make them speak English in 6 months' time, that the Queen of England will not be able to make out the difference. She will think that this is a highly educated person. So this doctor wakes up and says, it's not possible. You can't do this. You just can't take anybody from the road and train them to speak like nobility. So the challenge is up. They wager some 100 pounds or something like that. And they're looking around, and there is one really rough flower selling girl who's sitting on the roadside and selling flowers and speaking horribly English. So they ask her, okay, we'll pay you a lot of money. Are you up for this experiment? And she agrees. So they take her, they bring her home, and the professor starts coaching her. So after 6 months, they put to the test and she passes brilliantly. Nobody can make out in London that she is a poor flower selling girl, and she actually from a humble background. But there is one problem. So the professor tells us that, look, you have passed this test, you speak English beautifully, but when you speak to me, you revert to that roadside manner. Why do you do that? Why don't you speak good English to me as well? And she tells him something very interesting. She says that everybody treats me like nobility. You continue to treat me like a roadside flower seller. So I speak to you like that. And I think this is very important, because if you treat your subordinates or your children or your employees and set the bar low, they are going to achieve. The idea is to set the bar high and motivate them to achieve that exalted goal and not to set the bar low. So the Pygmalion effect is actually classic. And the Pygmalion was made into a movie called My Fair Lady, which of course none of you would have heard. You heard of this. What is that movie called? Bahubali 3 and 4 and so on and so forth. But these are classics. You should go and look up My Fair Lady, and which is Audrey Hepburn, I think. Came out in the 1940s. But it's a classic. And I will request Shri Imtiaz to play this video. I want to discuss for 2-3 minutes after the videos. So guys online, we're going to go on to a video. So this is a true story. It's about, I'll give you a brief introduction. So this is about a diver. A diver is very specialized. Unfortunately for this driver, he loses one leg in an accident. So the Navy wants to throw him out and say, you are retired because of disability. And what happens here is that he's trying to fight for he's motivated to fight for his place because he thinks he's good. I want you to tell me, what do you think is happening here, and how does this whole thing actually work? And all these guys have done a brilliant job. Yeah. So
Have you ever wondered how stock trading
So can you relate motivation theory to that? Which part of it? Fascinating. So you can look at Albert Bandura's self-efficacy. Did he have confidence in self-efficacy? Absolutely, yes. Did he learn from a good man? Of course, if you watch the movie, you will find that he keeps calling him Cookie because in those days, only black people could only become cooks in the US Navy. And this guy starts off his career, and it's a very insulting term. And so he keeps calling him Cookie just to get his energy up, to drive him along. Yeah. And verbal persuasion, yes. And was this guy really aroused in the sense that he wanted to achieve? So Bandura's theory is fascinating. And if you look at a lot of sports teams, for example, when the Indian team goes out to play cricket, there's a huddle. Yeah. They are kind of charging up or charging each other up or getting themselves aroused in that sense so that they can play better. Obviously, you don't want to do that if you're going to play a game of chess or caroms or something like that, yeah, where you want to be a little calmer and more sort of focused. So today we talked about two very interesting things, that is personality and motivation, and we'll continue 2 weeks from now. And I hope all of you can submit your assignment one on time so that I can sort of have a look at it. Any questions you might have? Guys online, any questions? It need not be, you'll lose marks, that's all. It can be, you lose marks. I think you caught on very quickly. Yeah, just leave the person out. When you present, when you make your presentation, don't include that person's name. Yeah, if somebody is not, and I tell this to all groups, if you find somebody is not contributing, if you're agreeable and nice, they will exploit you. Be ruthless and just kick them out. It will serve you better. It will serve them also better. Four names. Yes, so don't bother about it. Who is that person? But is he here by any chance? Oh, it's a girl. Hmm? So the job is to kind of have a group charter, get together and solve this problem. I think the first step in that direction is to leave your ego at home. No, if did they appoint you as a spokesperson? No, then I think let's pass. Let's pass. Yeah, there's a job to do. Please get it done. I am not negotiating with students. You should not have joined if this was year end. Please go and get the job done. Any other questions? Thank you.